Willard is with us. He is a law professor at St. Louis University. He is a former White House attorney for Gerald Ford's family. And we're on the break. We're talking about his pardon, or we're talking about President Obama pardoning 46 drug offenders and what's going on with all this. But we were talking off the air, and you mentioned Gerald Ford's pardon of Richard Nixon. I don't know how much you're allowed to say, being a family attorney, but that, looking back, was the right thing to do, and yet Gerald Ford was criticized for it unmercifully at the time.
Probably cost him the 76 election against then Governor Carter. He decided after his a press conference in August of 74, where back of the envelope McGraw, he got 30 questions and 27 of them were about Watergate and Richard Nixon and the prosecution. So he decided to put Watergate, we had to put Watergate behind us to get on with the other issues. He pardoned Nixon, was pilloried from stem to stern, probably cost him the election. Fast forward then to the early 2000s, and the Kennedy family gave him the Profile and Courage Award for the courage he showed in pardoning Nixon.
And is it true that Ted Kennedy... Tell the story about Ted Kennedy.
Well, at the ceremony at the Kennedy Library, Caroline was there, Senator Ted Kennedy was there, and Senator Kennedy read from his remarks on the Senate floor in 1974, and they were, shall we say, not pretty.
Right.
Very critical of President Ford. And at the ceremony at the Kennedy Library, he turned to the president and said, "Mr. President, you were right. I was wrong. My brother would be proud that you have this award."
Wow, that's pretty powerful stuff. So getting back to these pardons, is it safe to say that the Get Tough on Crime 80s and 90s was an epic failure?
I wouldn't say it was an epic failure, but I think in retrospect, many policymakers would say maybe these mandatory minimum sentences, maybe we need to rethink that and have a little more individualized sentencing. So what President Obama has done, and I think this is an important distinction, McGraw, he has given a commutation of sentence. So the conviction still stands. He has not given them a full and complete pardon, which has the effect of wiping out the conviction. He's given them a presidential reprieve, a presidential commutation, and they will be getting out of prison, as we said earlier on, in a staggered basis. But again, whether it was the 80s and 90s, let's lock them up and throw away the key, whatever piece of the criminal justice system you want to look at, it's broken.
Right. Sending drug addicts to jail is a big topic of conversation, especially today with what's going on with heroin and meth and things like that. Many people are screaming for drug treatment facilities for these people. Don't throw them in jail, and yet they've gone to treatment 4, 5, 6, 7 times. They're not violent offenders. They're just drug addicts. Why send them to jail?
Well, why send them to jail? One answer, McGraw, is there is an element of the criminal justice system to protect law-abiding citizens. So if a person is an addict and near totally chemically dependent, but yet they have been committing crimes which hurt our fellow citizens,
right,
the criminal justice system has to protect us from that.
Correct.
Where's the balance?
Right.
Where's the balance?
Right, and that's why you're a law professor and have 3 hours to sort of pick and choose and pick on your students. But I'll play devil's advocate and say, you're knocking over an old lady, or you're robbing a convenience store. You're stealing somebody's credit card for $20, $30, $40, $50 to get the next high. Instead of spending $20,000 a year locking you up for 5 years, take $10,000 of that and put you into a drug treatment program and get better that way. We save money and we don't ruin your life in the process.
Great hypothetical. The question is the reality. So, great hypothetical, McGraw, put them in a drug treatment center. And if at the end of that, the system has avoided the little old lady being knocked down at the ATM for $20
right,
for the next crack of cocaine. But what happens if they go through the treatment center and a month later they knock the little old lady in front of the ATM?
Right.
And there's no right answer.
Right.
There's no wrong answer. My personal view is that the pendulum has probably swung a little too far,
right.
And that we need to be a little more creative, recognizing there are bad people out there who are drug addicts and should be incarcerated for a very long time.
Right. It's a great point in that there is no one size fits all. And if there's not one size fits all, you are going to have mistakes. There's going to be a judge that gives a light sentence to a bad guy. There's going to be a judge that gives a tough sentence to a good guy.
Right.
And so if you take that out of the judge's hands, you have to be at least understand that mistakes will be made.
Right. Exactly. Mistakes will be made in the courtroom. And as we were talking earlier, I believe that third leg of that criminal justice stool being the presidential pardon power for federal crimes, gubernatorial for state, that has an important role to play in the White House and in the 50 state houses to find a better solution.
What happens going forward? Does President Obama, he's talking about doing this for hundreds of people.
Oh, hundreds, if not thousands. He has, and his Justice Department have promulgated a sweeping new procedures to help expedite the process. I saw somewhere that there are several hundred major law firms that are helping to facilitate this. So it's getting some real traction, and I think the next 18 months, I think we will see more than the 46 commutations that he issued on Monday.
He's a constitutional law professor, and so are you. Does it take somebody like that as a constitutional law professor to sort of see the injustice and to sort of push this down the line, as opposed to Clinton, who was a lawyer but wasn't a constitutionalist, and Obama and Bush, who wasn't? I mean, is this uniquely him because he's sort of been there at some point?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think it's as much looking at it from a legal construct as a policy construct. That the fact that we are spending billions of dollars in the criminal justice system to incarcerate people, there has to be a better way. And I think he's looking at it from a policy standpoint.
You said, Greg Willard, last point, and that this is one of the biggest unchecked powers a president has, and they choose not to use it.
It is, McGraw. If you go back to your civics class in junior high, there's one power in Article 2 of the Constitution that the president has that is completely unchecked, and that's the pardon power.
Interesting. Greg Willard, KTRS legal analyst. Thank you, sir, for joining us, and we look forward to chatting with you down the road.
Glad to be with you, McGraw.
9:46 here, Big 550.